Hello, my name is Felicia Istad. I'm from Norway. I graduated from London School of Economics with a degree in Master of Science in Management last year. I then came to Korea after graduation to work at the Royal Norwegian Embassy in Seoul. And I am currently preparing to proceed with a PhD in public policy at Korea University. Today I will be presenting to you my paper titled A Strategic Approach to Cultural Diplomacy in South Korea. To briefly sum up my paper, I would like to assess current government policies and then proceed to provide broad policy recommendations. And I would like to thank you for inviting me to present my paper here today. I will very briefly explain the difference between diplomacy and public diplomacy. I think it was introduced earlier here today. The two differ in some major aspects. The first one is the kind of assets that the government utilize to influence foreign publics. So in traditional diplomacy, we use the hard tools such as economic and military sanctions, and in soft power, in public diplomacy, we use the application of soft power such as cultural contents and national values. Another aspect in which diplomacy and public diplomacy differs is that the government communicates not only with a foreign government but also with a foreign public, and furthermore, it's not only one government communicating with another government, it's several actors in one nation communicating with several actors in the other nations, including stakeholders such as NGOs, etc. And according to COL 2008, there are 5 major categories of public diplomacy: listening, advocacy, cultural diplomacy, exchange diplomacy, and international broadcasting. I will focus on cultural diplomacy today. I'm not providing policy recommendations for public diplomacy as a whole. It's a very broad subject. I will focus specifically on cultural diplomacy in Korea. I really like this definition of cultural diplomacy and subsequent comments, so I would like to read it to you. It's from the United States Department of State, 2005. Cultural diplomacy, which has been defined as the exchange of ideas, information, art, and other aspects of culture among nations and their peoples in order to foster mutual understanding, is the linchpin of public diplomacy, for it is in cultural activities that a nation's idea of itself is best represented. So within public diplomacy, there is cultural diplomacy, and within cultural diplomacy, there are several segments. I have only listed a few of the segments here. I will give a more comprehensive list later on in my presentation. So there's music, television dramas, literature, cinema, etc. The aspects of cultural diplomacy in South Korea that I will discuss with you today is first the rise of Hallyu, and then I will continue to talk about the limitation of the government's approach to Hallyu and to promotion of Hallyu as part of its cultural diplomacy. So, in my paper, I argue that there is no one agreed upon reason as to why Hallyu has succeeded so broadly as it has done, but there is clearly an agreement that Hallyu is on the rise and that its impact is significant. I have provided some numbers both on exports of cultural contents and related consumer goods. So this is the very specific number for Hallyu. How much have we exported Hallyu products such as music, drama, etc. abroad? And you can see that it was as much as $6.16 billion in 2014, and then it rise to $7.3 billion in 2015. I consider that a pretty high increase. And also in my paper, I show that if you look further back in 2004 and back to the 90s, then you will see that the increase has been significant over the past 1 decade. What is interesting is that the Korean government also lists the economic effect of Hallyu. Personally, I think this is a disputable number because it is scientifically difficult to measure the impact of the effect of Hallyu. But still, I would like to present the number, and again, 12.6 trillion won in 2012 and 15.6 trillion won in 2005 and 15. And that's also a significant increase. And if the number is accurate, and I believe that it does imply to some extent the impact of Hallyu on the economy, it should be considered significant. Before I move on, I would like to add to the numbers that there has been some development in the past 3 years that have added to these arguments of economic effects of Hallyu, and that are 2 dramas. My Love from the Star and Descendants of the Sun. The first one came out in 2013, the second one came out in 2015. And after the dramas aired, there was a significant increase in tourism into Korea. There was also a significant increase in exports of cultural products. And it seems rather undisputed that the dramas had an effect on the economy. And you could also argue, although it's a personal argument, that it did also have some impact on the image of Korea, a positive impact. That being said, soft power cannot be measured in numbers by looking at economic statistics, but you can get an impression of the awareness, the level of awareness, the level of favorability that comes with dramas such as Descendants of the Sun. So, whereas I recognize that the Hallyu is on a rise and that it has had a significant impact, I would like to argue that the government needs to improve its approach to cultural diplomacy. More specifically, I would like to argue that it needs a more strategic approach. For starters, there has been a lack of continuity between the governments. So the previous government, the Lee Myung-bak administration, they set up a council called the Presidential Council of Nation Branding. I'm not equaling nation branding to public cultural diplomacy, but it has a very strong interconnection and relevance. And then the council did not continue when the Park Geun-hye government took over the office in 2013, 2014, when President Park established the Center of Creative and Culture and Creativity Fusion Belt. The Culture and Creativity Fusion Belt is an overarching project. It's not a council the way that PCNB was, but it's a policy direction through which President Park seeks to promote Hallyu contents. So this is the first issue, the changing policies with the changing government. And this is not something that is unique to Korea, however. That should be recognized. And then the next issue is a fragmented institutional approach. And this is maybe my major argument. So you have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which we're lucky to have here today. And then we have the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. And several authors in the academic sphere argue that both those 2 ministries, but also other organizations, both related to the government and not affiliated with the government, needs much more coordination amongst themselves. And one consequence of not having adequate coordination is that you don't have sufficient information sharing, and also you have overlapping policies, you have overlapping activities. And I can add to this that the current government is indeed investing a lot of money in promoting Hallyu. It did not earlier, like back in 2008, 2012. If you look at academic papers at that time, they largely criticized the lack of support, financial support for public diplomacy in Korea. I don't think that's such a big issue anymore. That should be recognized, but it needs much more structure. And this leads me to the fourth point, which is diversification without structure. So Hallyu is a very broad term. It involves music, dramas, it can even involve food, literature. It's a very, very broad concept. And when you promote Korean culture abroad, what are you really promoting? What is the image that we have of Korea? Some authors also argue that slogans such as dynamic Korea, sparkling Korea lack specificity, that it is vague and that it is difficult to grasp what Korean culture is really about or what to think of when you think of Korean culture. But then at the same time, I would like to emphasize that I think it's a great asset to Korea that it has so many cultural sources from which it can benefit from. So this should be utilized. So to conclude, I argue that there is an absence of a strategic approach to cultural diplomacy, which leads me to my policy recommendation. So as I mentioned in my self-introduction, I studied management at LSE, and I think that might be the reason why when I read about public diplomacy that I came to think about the lack of strategy. That was something that struck me reading the literature and the government policies. And therefore, and more specifically, I also came to think of the Walt Disney Company, because Walt Disney is an entertainment company. It has diversified assets, including films, broadcasting, webtoons, etc. So in some ways, it is similar to Hallyu, which is, as I mentioned, also diversified. This is a map of the multi-divisional corporate structure of Walt Disney. This is the original drawing that Walt Disney presented to his company back in 1975. You can see at the middle here, there's theatrical films, cinema. And then related to that, you got music, TV, merchandise licensing, Disneyland, etc. So this is the so-called Disney receipt. It's rather unique within the management strategy. And again, here you can see TV publications, magazine, comic strips. It's rather diversified, but then by putting theatrical films at the middle, Disney has managed to create a synergy between its different assets. And that's my argument here today, that Korea also needs a synergy between its assets. So when Disney released, for example, Frozen, which was inspired by Norway, which I'm proud to say, Frozen also appeared in comic strips. There's live Frozen figures in Disneyland. You can greet them, you can hug them, take photos with them. There's merchandise licensing. I gave my younger sister a Frozen doll. And there's music, the Let It Go song, which is a famous example, and so on. So you can see that these are synergizing in that they're reinforcing each other, because when the Let It Go song becomes famous and popular, then the movie gets more attention. And when the movie gets more attention, then more people want to read the magazine, or they want to purchase the products. So this is Disney taking advantage of the complementarity between its assets. And I would like to argue that the Korean government could do the same thing by placing television dramas at the center of its cultural diplomacy. At this point, I would like to highlight that I do not choose Korean dramas because it's the largest export product, or it's because it's the best export product or most prominent cultural asset or whatever. Indeed, it is only 16% compared to 21% of publishing referring to music. And what's interesting is that when you look at Disney's diversification, you can also see that the Walt Disney Studios, which is the theatrical films that are at the center of its structure, is only 16% compared to 46% of media networks. So here the reason why I argue that Korean television drama should be at the center is because they promote various aspects of Korean culture. First of all, they promote Korean values. They communicate Korean values to the viewers. And they also promote Korean fashion. They also promote Korean food. I know several people who've seen Korean food in dramas. They came to Korea, they got fascinated. They're also promoting music. And for me, this is a strong argument because some might argue that K-pop should be at the middle of formation. But I believe that the relation between the dramas and music is also important because when the music gets popular, if it's a song of a drama, then the drama might get attention, and if the drama gets attention, then the artist can get attention, and so on. So there is various synergies, various potential synergies, and I believe to some extent they're already realized. I would like to recognize that at this point, that I'm not saying that there are not complementarity or synergies between the Korean cultural assets, because indeed there are, but I believe this could be enhanced. So therefore, I have come to the end of my presentation. I would like to sum up that cultural diplomacy has been recognized by the Korean government as a central aspect of its public diplomacy and diplomacy in general. It has also received support, and the government is paying attention to its cultural diplomacy. It's making effort to promote and enhance its public diplomacy, and Korea has great potential. However, as I just mentioned, Korea needs to create more synergy effects between its assets, and one way of doing that is creating a multidivisional structure, applying strategy theory, and perhaps even get inspired by the Walt Disney model. Thank you for listening.